Erkin exchanges the forsaken lady for Kettle. The broken rancher gave her true love. The price of Kettle. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty courtyard of the Whitmore estate. But Eleanor felt nothing but cold dread settling in her bones. She stood at her bedroom window, watching as her father and uncle conducted business with a stranger, a weathered man in worn leather boots, whose eyes seemed to appraise everything they touched, including her. "Eleanor, come down here this instant." Her father's voice boomed through the house, carrying the authority that had ruled her life for 23 years. She descended the grand staircase slowly, each step echoing in the marble foyer. The Whitmore family had once been among the most respected in the county, but recent financial troubles had stripped away their dignity along with their fortune. Eleanor had watched helplessly as her father sold off pieces of their legacy. First the prized horses, then the fertile southern fields, and now, there she is, her Uncle Charles said with false cheer as he entered the parlor. "Eleanor, meet Mr. Jeremiah Blackwood. He's come to discuss a business arrangement." Jeremiah Blackwood was a man carved from the frontier itself, tall and broad-shouldered, with hands that spoke of hard labor and eyes the color of storm clouds. His dark hair was streaked with premature silver, and a scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. When he looked at Eleanor, she saw something unexpected in his gaze: reluctance. "Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice rough as gravel. He didn't bow or offer pleasantries. "I understand your family has a proposition." Eleanor's father cleared his throat. "Yes, well, as we discussed, Miss Blackwood, you're in need of a wife to help manage your ranch, and we have certain financial obligations that require immediate attention." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She had suspected this moment would come, but hearing it spoken aloud made her legs weak. "Father, surely you don't mean—" "Hush, Eleanor," her father snapped. "Mr. Blackwood has offered a generous dowry, 50 head of prime cattle and enough gold to settle our debts. It's more than fair." "Fair?" Eleanor's voice rose despite her efforts to remain composed. "You're selling me like livestock." Jeremiah's jaw tightened, and for a moment Eleanor thought she saw anger flash in his eyes, but not neglect her. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," he said to her father. "Nonsense," Uncle Charles interjected. "Eleanor needs to understand the reality of our situation. The bank will foreclose within the month if we don't settle our debts. This arrangement benefits everyone." Eleanor looked between the three men, feeling like a prize Mary being evaluated at auction. "And what of my feelings in this matter? What of love?" Her father's laugh was bitter. "Love? Child, love is a luxury we can no longer afford. Mr. Blackwood is offering you security, a home, and respectability. Many women would be grateful for such an opportunity. Many women haven't been bartered for cattle." Eleanor shot back. Jeremiah stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "Miss Whitmore, might I have a word with you alone?" Her father started to protest, but Jeremiah's steely gaze silenced him. 5 minutes, when they were alone on the garden terrace. Jeremiah's demeanor shifted. The harsh businessman facade cracked, revealing something more vulnerable beneath. "I won't lie to you," he said quietly. "I need a wife. My ranch is struggling, and I need someone who can help me build something lasting. But I want you to know this arrangement, it doesn't have to be what your father makes it sound like." Eleanor studied his face, searching for deception. "What do you mean?" "I mean you'd have your own room, your own space. I wouldn't force anything on you that you didn't want." His voice grew softer. "You know what it's like to be trapped by circumstances beyond your control." There was pain in his words, a story he wasn't telling. Eleanor felt her anger cooling into curiosity. "Why do you need a wife so desperately that you'd pay such a price?" Jeremiah was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dying gardens. "My ranch, it's all I have left of my family. My parents built it from nothing, and I've been fighting to keep it alive since they died." But the neighboring ranchers, they don't trust a bachelor. They think I'm unstable, unreliable. A married man, though. A married man with a proper wife, that's someone they can do business with, so I would be a business asset. At first, perhaps. He turned to face her fully, but I'd hope in time we might become friends, partners, even. Eleanor felt tears threatening. And if I refuse, then I'll walk away right now. I won't be party to forcing a woman into marriage, no matter how much I need those cattle contracts. The sincerity in his voice surprised her. She had expected a brute, a man who would see her as property. Instead, she found someone who seemed as trapped as she was. My father will disown me if I refuse, she said quietly. And if you accept, Eleanor looked back at the house where her father and uncle waited, probably already counting their money. Then she looked at Jeremiah Blackwood, this stranger who was offering her an escape from one cage into another, but perhaps a cage with an unlocked door. If I accept, she said slowly, I want your word that you'll treat me with respect, that you'll never raise a hand to me, and that if I'm truly miserable, you'll help me find another way. Jeremiah nodded solemnly. You have my word, Miss Whitmore. On my parents' graves, Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood at the edge of a cliff. Behind her lay the familiar misery of her father's house and the shame of their financial ruin. Ahead lay the unknown, a broken ranch, a scarred man, and the faint possibility of something better. Then I accept your proposal, Mr. Blackwood. Ready to discover how Eleanor's new life unfolds. Continue reading to see if this arrangement of convenience can bloom into something real. 3 days later, Eleanor found herself in a wagon beside her new husband, watching the Whitmore estate disappear behind a cloud of dust. She had packed only her most practical belongings. Her father had made it clear that her dowry included little beyond her person and a few personal effects. The journey to Jeremiah's ranch took most of the day, and as they traveled deeper into the frontier, Eleanor began to understand the magnitude of her decision. The landscape grew wilder, more unforgiving, with fewer signs of civilization. When they finally crested a hill and she saw Blackwood Ranch spread out below them, her heart sank. The main house was a modest two-story structure that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, several shutters hung askew, and the porch sagged on one side. The barn was in better condition, but the fencing was patched and repatched, and the few cattle she could see looked thin. It's not much to look at right now, Jeremiah said, his voice tight with embarrassment. But the bones are good, the land is fertile, and the water rights are secure. Eleanor tried to keep a smile from her voice. How long has it been struggling? 3 years. Ever since the drought hit and we lost most of the hair. I've been rebuilding slowly, but it's been... He paused, searching for words. Difficult. As they approached the house, Eleanor noticed a woman emerge from the kitchen. She was perhaps 40, with graying brown hair pulled back severely, and a face that spoke of hard living. Her expression was distinctly unwelcoming. That's Martha, Jeremiah explained. She's been keeping house since my mother died. She's protective. Martha's greeting confirmed Eleanor's suspicions. So this is the fancy lady you bought yourself, she said, looking Eleanor up and down with obvious disapproval. Hope she's tougher than she looks. Martha, Jeremiah's voice carried a warning. Mrs. Blackwood is the lady of this house now. I expect her to be treated with respect. The title Mrs. Blackwood sent a strange shiver through Eleanor. The hasty ceremony 3 days ago had been a legal formality, witnessed only by a justice of the peace and her uncle. It hadn't felt real then, and it barely felt real now. I'll show you to your room, Jeremiah said, carrying her single trunk up the front steps. The interior of the house was clean but sparse. The furniture was well made but worn, and Eleanor could see where feminine touches had once softened the masculine edges. A faded flower pattern on the wallpaper, delicate lace curtains that had been mended multiple times, small decorative items that spoke of a woman's presence. "This was my parents' room," Jeremiah said, opening a door to reveal a large bedroom with windows facing east. "I thought you might like the morning light. I've moved my things to the room down the hall." Eleanor stepped inside, noting the beautiful quilt on the bed and the small vanity by the window. "It's lovely. Your mother had good taste." "She did." Jeremiah's voice softened. "She would have liked you, I think. She always said this house needed a woman's touch to truly come alive." After Jeremiah left her to settle in, Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process her new reality. Through the window, she could see the vast expanse of the ranch, rolling hills, dotted deserts, scrub brush, and the occasional tree stretching to the horizon. It was beautiful in its wildness, but also intimidating in its isolation. A knock at her door interpreted her thoughts. "Come in." Martha entered without ceremony, carrying a tray with simple fare, bread, cheese, and water. "Supper won't be for another 2 hours. Thought you might be hungry." "Thank you," Eleanor said, genuinely grateful. "That's very kind." Martha set the tray down and turned to go, then paused. "Look, I don't know what kind of arrangement you and Jeremiah have, but I'll tell you this, he's a good man. Been through hell these past few years, but he's never lost his decency. Don't you go breaking what's left of his heart." The word surprised Eleanor. "I have no intention of hurting him. Maybe not intentionally, but your city folk used to find things. This life." Martha gestured toward the window. "It's hard, harder than you can imagine. And when the novelty wears off and you start missing your comfortable life, remember that he gave up everything he had to bring you here." After Martha left, Eleanor pondered her words. She walked to the window and watched as Jeremiah emerged from the barn, leading a limping horse. Even from a distance, she could see the gentleness in his movements as he examined the animal's leg. Whatever else he might be, he wasn't cruel. That evening, at dinner, Eleanor got her first real glimpse of the challenges facing the ranch. Jeremiah spread papers across the kitchen table after they'd eaten Martha's simple but hearty stew. "The Hendersons to the east have been expanding their operation," he explained, pointing to a rough map. "They've been buying up smaller ranches, and they've made it clear they'd like to add this land to their holdings." "Have they made an offer?" Eleanor asked. "Several, each one higher than the last." Jeremiah's jaw tightened. "But this land has been in my family for 30 years. My father died defending it from claim jumpers, and my mother poured her heart into making it a home. I once..." Eleanor studied the map, noting the strategic position of Blackwood Ranch. "What about the water rights you mentioned? That's the key. We control access to Miller's Creek, which feeds into the main river. Without our water rights, the Henderson operation would have to drive their cattle 15 miles to the next reliable source. So they need this land, desperately, and they're not above using pressure to get what they want." Eleanor looked up sharply. "What kind of pressure?" Jeremiah was quiet for a moment, then rolled up his sleeve to reveal a partially healed burn mark on his forearm. 3 weeks ago, someone set fire to our high barn. I managed to save most of the feed, but not without cost. You think it was the Hendersons? I can't prove it, but yes. And there have been other incidents. Fences cut, cattle, spooked, equipment sabotages. You met her eyes. I want you to know what you've gotten yourself into. Eleanor, this isn't just about rebuilding a ranch, it's about survival. Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Would it have changed your decision?" She considered this honestly. "I don't know. Maybe. But I'm here now, and I don't break my word any more than you break yours." Something shifted in Jeremiah's expression, surprise perhaps, or the beginning of respect. "You might be tougher than you look after all. I suppose we'll find out," Eleanor said, and for the first time since arriving, she felt a spark of determination rather than fear. Will Eleanor prove tough enough for frontier life? Discover how she faces her first real tests in the next chapter. Eleanor's first real test came sooner than expected. She had been at the ranch for only a week when Jeremiah shook her awake before dawn, his face grim in the lamplight. "Eleanor, I need your help. The cattle are spooked. Something's got them running toward the ravine. If they go over, we'll lose half the herd." She was out of bed and reaching for her clothes before she was fully awake. "What can I do? Can you ride?" "Yes, but it's been years since. It'll have to do. Martha's too old for this kind of work, and I can't handle them alone." 10 minutes later, Eleanor found herself mounted on a gentle mare named Daisy, following Jeremiah into the pre-dawn darkness. The sound of lowing cattle and thundering hooves grew louder as they rode toward the source of the commotion. There, Jeremiah pointed toward a mass of dark shapes moving across the hillside. "They're heading straight for Devil's Drop. We need to turn them before they reach the edge." Eleanor's heart pounded as she saw the situation. Dozens of cattle were running in panic, their eyes white with fear. In the distance, she could make out the dark line where the land simply ended, a 60-foot drop into a rocky ravine. "What spooked them?" she called over the noise. "Don't know, but I smell smoke. Someone set another fire, probably to drive them toward the cliff." Jeremiah's voice was tight with anger. "Stay behind me and follow my lead. We need to get ahead of them and turn the leaders." What followed was the most terrifying and exhilarating hour of Eleanor's life. She discovered muscles she'd forgotten she had as she and Jeremiah worked to outflank the stampeding herd. Her riding skills, rusty from years of disuse, came back with desperate necessity. "Now," Jeremiah shouted, spurring his horse forward, "help me toward them." Eleanor followed, her heart in her throat as they raced alongside the panicked cattle. Jeremiah was magnificent to watch, completely at home in the saddle, reading the animals' movements like a language only he understood. Gradually, through a combination of positioning, shouting, and sheer determination, they managed to turn the lead steers away from the cliff. By the time the sun rose, the cattle were grazing peacefully in a safe pasture, and Eleanor was slumped in her saddle, exhausted but triumphant. "You did well," Jeremiah said, and the approval in his voice warmed her more than she expected. "I couldn't have managed it alone." "I can barely feel my legs," Eleanor admitted, but she was smiling. "That'll pass. The question is," he studied her face carefully, "how do you feel about what happened?" Eleanor considered this as they rode slowly back toward the house. She was dirty, exhausted, and probably bruised in places she hadn't discovered yet. Her hair had come completely undone, and her riding dress was torn in 3 places. By all rights, she should be horrified. Instead, she felt more alive than she had in years. "I feel like I actually accomplished something," she said finally. "At home, my biggest challenge was choosing which dress to wear to dinner. This mattered." Jeremiah's smile was the first genuine one she'd seen from him. "It did matter. You saved our herd, Eleanor. That's not something many people can say." As they approached the barn, Martha emerged from the house, her face creased with worry. When she saw them both safe, relief flooded her features. "Thank the Lord," she muttered. "When I saw that smoke and heard the cattle running," she looked at Eleanor up and down, taking in her disheveled appearance. "Well, I'll be damned. You actually did it." "Language, Martha," Jeremiah said mildly, but he was still smiling. "Don't you language me, Jeremiah Blackwood. I've been worried sick." Martha turned to Eleanor with something approaching respect. "Come on, girl. Let's get you cleaned up and fed. You've earned it." Later, as Eleanor soaked her aching muscles in a hot bath, she reflected on the morning's event. She had proven something to herself, that she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined. But more importantly, she had seen a different side of Jeremiah. During the crisis, he had treated her as a partner, not a delicate flower to be protected. He had trusted her with real responsibility and acknowledged her contribution. It was a far cry from her father's dismissive attitude or her uncle's condescending manner. That evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Jeremiah brought up the subject that had been weighing on both their minds: The fire wasn't accidental, he said quietly. I found evidence of accelerant near the old oak tree. Someone wanted those cattle to run. Zircandazons. Most likely, this was more sophisticated than the previous incidents. They're escalating. Eleanor felt a chill of fear, but also a surprising surge of anger. What can we do? We could sell, Jeremiah said, his voice carefully neutral. Take their offer and start over somewhere else. Eleanor looked at him sharply. Is that what you want to do? No, but I have to consider your safety now. This morning could have gone very differently. If you'd been hurt. He trailed off, his jaw tight. But I wasn't hurt, and he won't be driven away by bullies any more than you will. Jeremiah turned to study her face in the fading light. You realize what you're saying? If we stay and fight, things will likely get worse before they get better. Eleanor thought of her father, who had sold her for cattle rather than stand up to his creditors. She thought of her uncle, who had treated her like a burden to be disposed of. Then she thought of this morning, the trust in Jeremiah's eyes, the satisfaction of real accomplishment, the feeling that she was finally somewhere she could make a difference. I'm saying I'm not the same woman who left her father's house a week ago, she said firmly. I'm Miss Blackwood now, and this is my home, too. I won't let anyone drive me away from it. Something shifted in Jeremiah's expression, surprise, giving way to something deeper. You mean that? I do. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. We're partners in this. Remember, partners don't abandon each other when things get difficult. Jeremiah was quiet for a long moment, then reached over and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her since their wedding day, and Eleanor felt a surprising warmth at the contact. Thank you, he said simply. He haven't had a real partner in, well, ever. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, Eleanor realized that something fundamental had changed between them. The arrangement that had begun as a business transaction was becoming something else, something real. The partnership is deepening, but greater challenges lie ahead. Don't miss the dramatic conclusion, where love finally blooms. 2 months after the cattle incident, Eleanor had settled into ranch life with a determination that surprised everyone, including herself. Her hands, once soft and pale, were now calloused from work. Her complexion had gained color from the sun, and her body had grown strong from the physical demands of frontier life. More importantly, her relationship with Jeremiah had evolved from wary partnership to genuine friendship. They worked side by side during the day and spent their evenings planning improvements to the ranch. Eleanor had proven herself invaluable, not just as an extra pair of hands, but as someone with a sharp mind for business and an eye for efficiency. We need to diversify, she said one evening, as they reviewed the ranch's finances. Cattle alone won't sustain us, especially with the Hendersons trying to undercut our prices. What do you suggest? Jeremiah asked, genuinely interested in her opinion. Horses. You have an excellent eye for bloodlines, and there's a growing market for quality mounts. We could start small, breed our best mare to that stallion the Pattersons own. Jeremiah considered this. It would take time to see a return. All good investments do. Within 3 years, we could have a reputation for producing the finest horses in the territory. As they talked, Eleanor found herself watching Jeremiah's face in the lamplight. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing the scar that marked his jaw and started seeing the intelligence in his eyes, the gentle strength in his hands, the way his rare smiles transformed his entire face. The realization that she was falling in love with her husband hit her like a physical blow. The next morning brought news that would test their partnership in ways neither had anticipated. A rider arrived with word that James Henderson himself was coming to make a final offer for the ranch. He's bringing his foreman and 2 other men, the messenger reported. Says he wants to discuss terms face to face. After the messenger left, Jeremiah began pacing the kitchen like a caged wolf. This isn't a social call. Henderson doesn't travel with an entourage unless he's planning something. What kind of something? Eleanor asked, though she suspected she knew. The kind that ends with us agreeing to sell. one way or another. Martha, who had been listening from the doorway, spoke up grimly. That man's got a reputation for getting what he wants, and he's not particular about his methods. Eleanor felt fear flutter in her stomach, but she pushed it down. When will they arrive? Tomorrow, most likely. Then we have tonight to prepare. Jeremiah stopped pacing and looked at her. Eleanor, maybe you should visit the Pattersons until this is over. I don't want you here if things turn ugly. Absolutely not. Eleanor's voice was firm. We're partners. Remember, I'm not running away. That evening, as they made their preparations, Eleanor found herself alone with Jeremiah in the barn. He was checking his rifle, his movements efficient but tense. Jeremiah, she said softly, there's something I need to tell you. He looked up, and in the lamplight she could see the worry etched in his features. What is it? Eleanor took a deep breath, knowing that after tomorrow she might not have another chance. I need you to know that this arrangement between us, it's become more than business for me. Jeremiah went very still. Eleanor, I know we agreed to be partners, and I know you married me for practical reasons, but I can't face whatever's coming tomorrow without being honest about my feelings. She stepped closer, her heart pounding. I love you, Jeremiah. I love your strength and your gentleness. I love the way you treat the animals with such care, and the way you've never once made me feel like a burden or a purchase. I love that you see me as capable of more than I ever thought possible. Jeremiah set down his rifle and turned to face her fully. Eleanor, you don't have to say anything, she rushed on. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that this has been real for me. You've given me a life worth fighting for. Jeremiah was quiet for a long moment, his storm gray eyes searching her face. Then, slowly, he reached up and cupped her cheek with his calloused hand. You think I married you just for practical reasons? He asked softly. Eleanor's breath caught. Didn't you? At first, maybe, but his thumb traced her cheekbone gently. He started falling in love with you the moment you stood up to your father. And when you rode out with me to save the cattle, when you chose to stay and fight instead of running, that's when I knew I was lost. You love me, Eleanor whispered. I love your courage. I love your sharp mind and your stubborn streak. I love that you see potential in this broken-down ranch, and in this broken-down rancher. His voice grew husky. I love you, Eleanor Blackwood, more than I ever thought possible. When he kissed her, it was with all the tenderness and passion that had been building between them for months. Eleanor melted into his embrace, feeling as though she had finally come home. The next morning, James Henderson arrived as predicted, accompanied by 3 hard-looking men. It was a large man in his 50s, with cold eyes and an air of entitlement that immediately set Eleanor's teeth on edge. Blackwood, he said without preamble, I trust you've considered my offer. I have, Jeremiah replied evenly, and my answer is no. Henderson's smile was unpleasant. He was hoping you'd be reasonable. This is a generous offer, more than this place is worth. The ranch isn't for sale at any price. Everything's for sale, Blackcoop. It's just a matter of finding the right motivation. Henderson's gaze shifted to Eleanor, and she felt a chill at the calculation in his eyes. Perhaps your wife would be more practical about the situation. Eleanor stepped forward, her chin raised. Mr. Henderson, I believe my husband has made our position clear. Has he? Henderson's smile widened. Well then, let me make my position clear. This ranch will be mine, one way or another. You can take my generous offer and leave with your dignity intact, or you can continue to be stubborn and face the consequences. Is that a threat? Jeremiah's voice was dangerously quiet. It's a promise. I've been patient, but my patience has limits. What happened next unfolded with startling speed. Henderson's men moved to flank Jeremiah, but they had underestimated Eleanor. As one of Van Vetten reached for his gun, she grabbed the pitchfork, leaning against the barn wall, and brought the handle down hard on his wrist. The man yelped and dropped his weapon, and in that moment of confusion, His own rifle was in his hands faster than Eleanor could follow, trained on Henderson's chest. "I think it's time for you to leave," Jeremiah said calmly. Henderson's face flushed red with anger. "You're making a mistake, Blackwood. A big one. The only mistake would be staying here another minute," Eleanor said, still holding the pitchfork. "You're trespassing on our land." Henderson looked between them, his calculation evident. Finally, he stepped back. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Jeremiah said firmly, "because if you or your men set foot on my land again, I'll be ready for you, and next time, I won't be so polite." After Henderson and his men rode away, Eleanor and Jeremiah stood together in the yard, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. "That was either very brave or very foolish," Jeremiah said, looking at Eleanor with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Probably both," Eleanor admitted, "but I meant what I said. This is our land, our home. I won't let anyone take it from us." Jeremiah pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "We make a good team, Mrs. Blackwood." "The best," Eleanor agreed, and kissed him with all the love and determination in her heart. 6 months later, as Eleanor watched their first foal take its wobbly steps in the spring sunshine, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had been traded for cattle, treated like property, and thrust into a life she never could have imagined. But in losing everything she thought she wanted, she had found everything she actually needed: purpose, partnership, and a love deeper than any fairy tale. Jeremiah came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Eleanor leaned back against his solid warmth, watching their future take shape in the form of a perfect colt and his proud mother. The ranch was thriving. Their horse breeding program was already gaining attention, and Henderson had finally given up his harassment after a visit from the territorial marshal. "Only one," she said, turning in his arms to face him. Jeremiah's brow furrowed with concern. "What's that?" Eleanor smiled, her eyes dancing with mischief. "Mischief. I regret that it took me so long to realize that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as the worst." Jeremiah's answering smile was radiant. "I love you, Eleanor Blackwood. And I love you, Jeremiah Blackwood, forever and always." As they kissed in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by the ranch they had built together through determination, partnership, and love, Eleanor knew that she had finally found her true home, not in a place, but in the heart of the man who had seen her worth when no one else would. Their love story had begun with a transaction, but it had bloomed into something eternal. A partnership of equals, a love built on respect and shared dreams, and a future as bright and endless as the frontier sky above them.